Hello and welcome to the Petticoated Swashbuckler. My name is Maren and today we're gonna work it. So, I've steadily for the last year and a half been working through an inventory that was made sometime around 1780. It lists the wearing apparel and other things of a Mrs. Bamford who had died just, a little previously to the making of that inventory. She was an Englishwoman, and I thought it'd be interesting to see what did an Englishwoman in 1780 or the third quarter of the 18th century actually wear. So I've been working through it, making things. Last video I showed you my black bombazine negligee and petticoat, so go have a look at that if you want. If you want to, learn more about that project. This time around I've found a point in the inventory that says 2 white petticoats worked at the bottom. And I thought that was really interesting, because what does worked mean? Does it mean, I'm guessing it does not mean working petticoats that she's been working in, and so they have stains at the bottom. That would be a very strange thing to put in an inventory, and also wouldn't match the rest of her clothing very well. So I thought, let's see if I can find some information on what worked means. And from what I can see, it means one of two things. It can mean decorated, trimmed, like the petticoat for my negligee. Again, should be a link somewhere if you want to have a look at that. But I think, yeah, it could mean that. That would make sense for her to have, because she has a lot of other very beautiful gowns, and she would like, if she wanted a big silk petticoat with lots of trim on it, that would make sense. It would fit the rest of her wardrobe. It can also mean embroidered, from what I understand, so that it has embroidery towards the hem of the petticoat, and that too would match. I mean, there are lots of examples in museum collections and the like of embroidered petticoats from the 18th century. So, as I don't know which one it is, and there are 2 of them, why not make one of each? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make an embroidered petticoat and a sort of trim, decorated petticoat. Do you want to come along? My main inspiration for the embroidered petticoat is this one from the National Trust. It's cotton and it's embroidered in wool, so that's what I decided to do. I've got this magnificent book called 18th Century Embroidery Techniques, and I found a pattern in it which is originally for a stomacher, but it had the same sort of swirly, flowery pattern that my inspiration petticoat had. So I made the pattern bigger, and then I started transferring it onto my petticoat. And because the cotton fabric is so light, I could just put my my piece of paper, my pattern, under it and then draw over it. And this saved me a lot of time and effort that I thought I had to put into tracing the pattern onto the fabric. So maybe that's why they made the embroidery on white cotton in the first place, in the original. I don't know, but luckily for me this was fairly simple. Then I got to work. I used a wide variety of embroidery stitches, and all of them from the embroidery book. So I'm fairly sure that they were all used in the period. Hand embroidery when you're not super, you know, I've done a fair bit of embroidery before, but I'm not in any way, shape or form super trained, so this took time. It took so much time. I think I clocked in more than 100 hours on embroidery alone, but it's kind of mindfulness, and it was actually very, yeah, I enjoyed bringing my embroidery around with me, doing a little bit now and then, and just seeing it sort of grow and come together. So I'm nearly done with embroidery, and it's taken me, I think I'm nearly at 150 hours now. But of course I'm not a trained embroiderer. Like, I've done embroidery before, but it's a while ago now, and I don't really, I've had to sort of get into it. I have little training, let's put it that way. I have very little training. I am now, this is what's left. From there and to here. And this is the second piece of skirt. And it's, I mean, now it's upside down, but I'm so happy with this. Like, I'm so happy with the way it looks. It looks right, it looks like 18th century embroidery I've seen on other things. I love the colours. I'm really, really proud of my own work on this, on my own sort of stitching. Hang on, I'll show you. Okay, so I've used a lot of different stitches, and that's on purpose because I wanted, I both so that I wouldn't, you know, bore myself to death, but also so that I could learn a large variety of stitches and to get different looks, different textures in the stitch work. So I used, for all these lines, I used stem stitch. I've used a lot of chain stitching, like, don't know if you can see, but like this is a chain stitch, and the dark borders around the pale green leaves, that's a chain stitch. I've used, for a lot of the flowers and the leaves, I've used satin stitch, like this is satin stitch, this is satin stitch. This flower here is a sort of combination of satin stitch in the blue areas, and then a sort of short and long stitch, which is almost like a satin stitch. Going here, I'll see if I can zoom it in. I've used, not quite sure what these stitches are called. These sort of, to make the leaves look like leaves, basically. I've used a lot of different kinds of milfoil stitches. These are actually blanket stitch with that sort of row going here, and I've used a lot of caterpillar stitch, both for some of the leaves and also inside the flowers. and some French knots. So here are French knots. There's a French knot here. I've used, you know, a lot of different stitches just to sort of spice it up, make it interesting. Some back stitching, the line around the sleeves are back stitched. Here's another one in chain stitch. Also not quite sure what these are called, but I found them on some 18th century embroidery, and they also really remind me of some of the embroidery on the national costume that I got when I was like 15, which made me happy. Had a lot of pine cones on it and they're embroidered like this, so that made me happy. So I think I'm quite, you know, I am fairly happy. Okay, who am I kidding? I'm really happy with my embroidery. I'm just gonna finish. I mean, there's not like I worked on this like an 18th century embroiderer would. For one thing, I don't think the 18th century embroiderer would start her like apprenticeship by embroidering an entire sort of skirt hem. But you know, go big or go home. I'm also like in an 18th century embroiderer's workshop. They would have these big sort of rectangular frames that you would almost like sew the fabric that's supposed to be embroidered onto, and then you'd work standing or sitting, you know, moving up and down along that. As you can see, my embroidery frame is a bit small, but I mean, it works sort of the same way. It fulfills the same function of holding the fabric taut and stable when I'm working on it, and it has allowed me to like bring my embroidery with me. I have brought it with me to visit people on holiday. I've been embroidering like at work, in the breaks, on the couch. I don't think I've embroidered in bed, but that's, you know, that's just coincidence. So I'm very happy. So I'm gonna finish it, and then we can actually start making this into a petticoat. So very nearly done now. I'm on the very last flower. I've got a few more leaves of the flower to do, and then sort of the caterpillar stitches out from the centre, and then the French knots in the centre. But I'm so close to the edge now that I've actually had to swap from my big embroidery hoop. Hello, darling. To my small one. I have a very grumpy cat, by the way, who feels like he's not being fed enough, even though he was fed 20 minutes ago. So if you hear anything, that's him. When I'm done with this, so this is the front piece of the skirt, this is the hem, obviously. When I'm done with it, what I will do is I'm going to mark out where the sort of pocket slits and the sides go. Then I'm going to sew up the sides, try and match the embroidery on this hem here in such a way that it's actually nice, with like where the embroidery on the hem of the other piece, so that they kind of, you know, fit, they match up. And then I think, I need to iron this out because it's been, I've brought it with me everywhere, so it's really wrinkly and horrible now. So what I think I'll do is I'll iron it out, and then I will line it or face it, face the hem, not just to hide my, my stitching on the wrong side, because it's, it's not, oh yeah, it's horrible. Sorry. It's not that they are, terrible, it's just that they are not as nice as the front side, and also I want to protect them from, from my shoes, grass, pebbles, chairs when I sit down. I really just want to make this embroidery last for as long as possible. So I will probably face the hem, might use linen actually, we'll see. And then I can pleat it all into a waistband, and we should have a worked petticoat. One worked petticoat. There's more than one. If you want more details on how I make petticoats, I will link my petticoat video from last year on the screen. But shortly I sew the sides up, I hem the pocket slits, and then I pleat the front and the back, two separate bands, so that I can tie it around my waist. And after doing that and facing the hem, I'm done with this petticoat and ready to move on to worked petticoat number 2. This petticoat I decided to make out of a white taffeta. As taffeta is a very tightly woven silk fabric, I didn't really have to do a lot of laying seams or hemming. What I instead did was I sewed up the side seams very simply, just using a running back stitch. No need to hem the pocket slits because I used the selvages. Here you see why there's no point in laying these seams or casting over or anything. The selvages are so tiny and so beautiful and so out of focus. I'm sorry about that. So really, there's nothing here that will fray, and it looks good. So instead of spending a lot of time doing that, I'll just fold them to the side and iron them down. And that'll be good enough, and I can move on to the fun part of actually decorating, trimming. So this is the pocket slit. Again, I'm just using the selvage, and yeah, this will be good enough, which is always great. So before doing anything else, I hemmed. I stitch a ribbon to the hem and fold that over onto the sort of inside, the back side, stitching that down at the top and bottom, and that makes for a really good, strong, pretty, and a very stable hem. Then I pleat my petticoat to the waistband and stitching that down. This is fairly difficult, fairly hard when you're sewing with taffeta, because it's such a tightly woven and sort of strong fabric, but the result is gorgeous. On to the fun part of trimming. Using the rest of the fabric that I cut my petticoat from, I cut 4 strips of fairly narrow satin, 4 narrow satin strips. I also cut a bigger sort of curved, wavy-like flounce to trim my petticoat with. So I'm slightly inspired by a petticoat that I will link down below. I didn't hem this. If I can get this into focus, thank you. You can see I used actually pinking scissors to cut all of this so that I wouldn't have to spend time hemming it. And this was really common in the period, really usual thing to do. So instead of spending time doing that, I could get right on to making rows of gathering stitches on, well, pretty much every piece in some way or another. The big top flounce has 2 rows of gathering stitches, a few centimeters apart, and hopefully this will make for a very pretty double row of gathering. You can kind of see here already how it'll look when I'm done. I stitched the taffeta strips together to form 2 longer rows, 2 long straps, kind of. One of them I made 1 long gathering seam along the middle. The other one, as you can see, I'm gathering into little puffs by just making a gathering stitch across and tying it up and sort of scrunching it to make these little poofy, almost like circles or little little puffs. The petticoat for the black negligee was trimmed very sort of straight across. So I wanted the trim on this one to be a bit more wavy. That seems to have been more popular in the 1760s, while the more sort of straight trim was more popular in the 1770s. So I wanted to take my 2 narrow strips of trim and make a sort of wavy pattern along the hem of the front, where they could cross over each other. I thought that would look nice. So here I just tried to sort of figure out how to place them, how to find, how to make them look fairly balanced. Stitching the trim on was a lot of work, but not nearly as much as embroidering that first petticoat, so it was fine. And also it was fun because it's kind of magic. Everything looks very messy and not very nice or neat to begin with. As you can see, there's just a lot of, it's basically a mess of gathers and pins and ruffles and trims, and The more you sort of work with it, the nicer it looks, the more even, the more sort of it looks like it's there on purpose and just not just sort of slapped on. So yeah, this was a very fun process. Here you can see I've stitched down the sort of edges of the gathered trim as well. I found that on another petticoat and I thought that looked very nice, and I like the effect of it. And also it makes the poofs that go over look or sort of stand out even more. The poofs were basically just attached where they're gathered, so that they can stand out a little bit from the background, and I helped them stand out even more by sort of folding them outwards. I don't know, poofing them up a bit. And with these attached and the big flounce above it, it was time to put it on and take a stroll about the garden.